G'day guys and welcome, my name is Michael and I am the Deadaussiegamer, here to share with you my tips, tricks, ideas and strategies for playing and running tabletop role-playing games. We're back with yet another class spotlight, focusing on the Cleric. Now what is a Cleric? These guys are absolutely incredible spellcasters that offer a great range of supporting features, ranging from the ability to heal allies, buff companions, to also being able to defend the front line by wearing slightly heavier and more powerful suits of armor. There are many uses for a cleric, and each of them are varied by not only the way you build them, but also by the deities they serve. Each have an entirely different playstyle based entirely around the code that each cleric needs to follow. Some deities may demand sacrifices in blood from their clerics, while others prefer a more gentle and tactile approach, offering second chances and peace to those who deserve it most. Now, many classes have their inspirations. Druids, for example, are inspired by nature, and when you have them in your campaign, the natural world will build on them. For clerics, the gods themselves and the churches that worship them shape exactly how it is you play and manage these characters. Without a good deity at its helm, a cleric can really become a lackluster character. I highly recommend, no matter what type of cleric you are trying to play, always revert to this one simple rule. You are a cleric of a god, not an avatar of that god. A lot of things that I see when I GM clerics is clerics who try to become the god. They carry their weapon, they dress like their god, they talk like their god, they walk like their god. And sure enough, eventually you just sit there and make all the comparisons between your character and the deity that they serve. But this doesn't necessarily have to be the only way your cleric functions. The church themselves have so many people from different diversities that serve under the same rules and same code that can create a whole world of variety. It doesn't always have to be the one specific type of character. Think of it like this. Instead of trying to become your character, instead of trying to become this deity, be grateful to the deity for the powers they've bestowed upon you. Show everyone your devotion through your thanks. Little things like performing your obediences in Pathfinder, which are these little acts that you do every morning ritualistically to show your worship. These elements of the gameplay help shape and round out not only you as a character, but the worship as well, because that's a major part too. I'm sure some of you may have come into the situation where your cleric has conducted a ceremony, whether it's a funeral for a fallen ally, a ritual blessing of an area through a consecrate spell, or even just the morning rising of the sun and the thanks for another day. Sometimes in a table, these can feel like they draw from the game or they waste time. A way to kind of circumvent that is to remember that your cleric doesn't necessarily have to worship on their own. No one really likes it when a cleric forces religion down your throat. But at the same time, no one really likes sitting there waiting at a table for the cleric to finish all the stuff they need to before you continue the adventure. Try having those moments where you celebrate your religion with your party. Have moments where you do something that is both fun and in service to your lord. A great example came at the hands of a cleric that a friend of mine was playing, and he was worshipping the god Kyrgyz, or the god of competition and dares and athletes. Now, his particular character liked to begin every single day with a challenge. It's a dare of some kind. This might be something like, I dare you to finish all your breakfast before me, or I will challenge you to a foot race for the first 100 meters. You see that tree over there? First one to, lay hands upon it wins. Now, these little things not only allowed him to perform his clerical duties, but also allowed the players to really engage with him in those ceremonies. Now, not all clerics will have as easy a time because, some clerics are, I go for a morning walk, or I have to go and lie to someone and trick them into buying a useless item from me. All of these things can become group activities if you open yourself up to it. Tell you the group that, hey, I need some help. This person has stolen something from me and I need to check if he's gotten it. Lie to your group and then lie to this other person. And that way, you're still conducting your ritual for the god of deception, even though it isn't necessarily, just all about your one individual player and their interaction. The other side of a cleric, apart from obviously your worship to a deity, is of course your loyalty to a church. Now, the church and the deity are entirely different. If you look at your god, you will have your very clear-cut and defined duties. You have to uphold this. You have to believe that. You have to make sure that the enemies of your god pay retribution. Whereas a church may have agendas, because they are, in fact, a social construct. They're something that exists in the world. This could be something like the Church of Healing having trouble with a virulent plague. So you as a cleric need to go and help them with that duty. It could be something along the lines of a great battle is about to kick off and the troops need a boost in morale, so you need to go there and give a rousing speech before they head into war. Whatever the case is, working for the church can often provide not only a great insight into how it is your character performs their duties as a cleric, but also helps identify exactly some of the ways your character interacts with the world around them. Are they well received? Are they disliked? Do you worship a god that is openly celebrated in this kingdom, or do you need to hide and conceal who you are? All of these things and more make a cleric a very interesting dynamic, so long as you don't fall into the category of, I need to do this one simple thing. Now, the one simple thing I refer to, of course, is the thing that clerics, I think, get shoehorned into doing more than anything else, and that is healing. Clerics make fantastic healers because, well, naturally they have the healing spells, and more often than not, possess a bunch of additive skills that enhance their healing powers. However, healing can be a tough bill to fit. Every time you attempt to cast a healing spell, it deprives you of the ability to interact with a particular round of combat. Whereas everyone else gets to draw blood and be able to really sink their teeth into a scenario, in the case of barbarians, sometimes literally, you as the cleric can sometimes find that you are in the back lines, doing nothing but healing people or waiting to heal people, or even perhaps just buffing people with spells that you know probably won't last their duration and will wean off in the few rounds after everything is dead. There is truth to this, and honestly, I think clerics or any kind of healers, not just clerics like oracles or, alchemist healers, whoever, they really have a rough job. To kind of abate that, I always say that there are two things you can look at in terms of healing your allies. The first is you can look at restoring hit points. Very simply done, very easily done. The second thing you can look at doing is preventing them from receiving more damage. And I think that is a very underrated tactic for the cleric. Something I think a lot of people simply pass off as, well, no, they've got their AC, they're all fine, they can do well. Well, in fact, a cleric with the Sanctuary spell, for example, which prevents people from attacking a target, can often use it against an injured ally in order to buy precious moments for them to be able to heal and restore and buff that individual before they get back into the fray. In addition, some clerics have the ability to possess power and control over their environment, creating walls of stone and earth, or even creating barriers of light and darkness in order to protect their allies. These can be equally as effective as a healing support role because, well, if they're not taking damage, then, well, haven't you stopped them from, dying? Isn't that part of what a healer is? I think that's definitely something I like to tell a lot of my players when they get into the role of a cleric, is you do not need to be shoehorned into healing. There are so many ways to heal without necessarily focusing on just making your one or two heals every single round. Alright, how do we portray a cleric? Now, clerics are a very complex class. Much like all the other classes that we've been through, core classes are always going to be based on where you come from. If you come from a land where religion is outlawed, for example, that'll shape the type of character you are, as opposed to if you come from a land that is based on the Orient, it'll also shape your personality and your style. However, I like to break down portraying a cleric to 4 different elements. The first is to learn your deity. Learn who they are, what they represent, and how you feel about them. How do you feel about your deity? Are there any moments in history that really stand out to you and make you think, wow, that was absolutely incredible. I hope one day that my destiny will lead me to something as awe-inspiring as this task beseeched by my God. Once you've kind of, gotten to know your deity, the next thing you need to learn is your code. What is it that your character believes? What is it your character upholds? To what capacity do you worship your deity? Are you someone who simply mouths the word and have been given power? Are you someone who is truly devoted, giving away life, body, soul to your cause? Or is it someone who is simply a part of something bigger than they are? A moving cog within the church as it moves through this landscape? Is this a cleric who simply is performing their duty for the greater good of the world around them? The next thing is to learn your scripture. Now, this is a tough place to be because, well, quite frankly, none of these scriptures tend to exist. When you play in a role-playing game, it's not like your GM comes up, whips out this massive book and goes, here you go, poof, there is the scripture on worshipping Sarenrae. However, what you could do is, with the assistance of your DM, or more the permission of your DM, is you can come up with tons of ideas for parables, sort of cautionary tales and other things that you as a character will then be able to share. One of the things that I do remember one of my players doing, which kind of bugged me at the time because I was young, I was dumb, and I didn't know how to play properly, but he came up with this full-on story for this god that I made up. And he, as a cleric, had done exactly that. He pulled out his holy book and he read through his holy book and he said, "Lo, on the first day he descended from the heavens, carrying upon him a handful of eggs. He cracked the eggs upon the earth and they sprouted into the giant mountains." And I was like, that's not what happened. As a GM, you can do that. I mean, technically it's your right to be able to tell your players, well, no, actually, guys, I'm the one building the world and building the lore. You can't just pull out random lore from your backpack and have it be true. At the same time, I think when it comes to scriptures and all of that, as a GM, it's a great idea to let your players run a little free with it. Because the thing is no one says that all clerics need to be right. All clerics do not need to have a firm, competent, and accurate grasp on everything that their deity discovers. Case in point, there are 5, I think, different religions who worship Norgorber, the god of assassins, poisons, greed, and murder. And, and secrets. And for me, I think of this character and I think, well, I mean, if there is a church for each different aspect of Norgorber, then wouldn't they have 5 entirely different books, 5 entirely different ways to worship and give praise to this one god? So, I mean, that's just food for thought. I mean, if you guys think that that's going to, be something that you're interested in, yeah, just let me know in the comments. Because, yeah, I think it's interesting. Like, yes, I am a cleric of Sarenrae, but I want to focus on the sun. I want to focus on the fact that fire is a big element. I want to burn things, incinerate evil and just vaporize it from the world. And this obviously is a prestige class in Chronicles of Righteousness, if Pathfinder again. But yeah, things like that I think really can make your character pop, having those scriptures, having those ideas of what your church has been telling people all these years about your God. And then, of course, you can learn and derive lessons from it as well. It's a great way to kind of make your character communicate how they are feeling or how other people should be feeling about a scenario, simply by reading out of scripture. There is a quote that I'd like to give, but it's from a thing that I don't want to spoil. So what I'm going to say is that there was this evil character, and she was talking to a captive. And the captive thought that she was certain to be tortured. That was definitely going to happen. Instead, the captor told this story about a pair of brothers who went to a farm and they both tilled the soil and worked hard. One of them basically believed that the world itself was ready to reap its bounty, and the other said, well, no, actually, it's not ready. We need to cultivate it more. And sure enough, they got into an argument, and one brother killed the second. And sure enough, after the second brother died, his blood ran into the fields, and then the crop grew once more. Now, the story here could just be a random story, but your character can then communicate the lesson, and that kind of gives them that wisdom, that sense of understanding the world around them that clerics and other divine characters tend to have. It's a tricky thing to balance, and I highly recommend if you do go down that way, write them in advance. Don't try to improvise it, because these things are very clear signs that you are making stuff up on the fly, and it can be a bit tricky to keep doing stuff like that. Alright, the last thing about portraying a cleric is the portrayal of their, I suppose, speech pattern. Now, many clerics will speak normally and will speak however their native culture speaks. However, one thing I've always loved is clerics and evangelists being super into whatever they're saying. You know, I'm currently playing in a Patreon game where I am playing a cleric of Razmir, based off an evangelist who basically rises up to his chair and says, "Praise be to Razmir, for he is almighty and all-seeing, and everything is good in his eyes. In order to make sure that you can truly understand and accept the true path of Razmir, I need you to put $1 in the hat. Put $1 in the hat. That's right. Can I get a hail, Razmir? Hail, Razmir!" Right? Like, all of this sort of stuff, for me, is just screams out like this devoted, well, in this case, lunatic, but, you know, this sense of, like, devotion and praise, almost like a celebration of everything they say, is great. And the dialogue that you can have with a cleric can be really, really interesting, because obviously there are some people who don't like people coming up and throwing religion at them. There are people out there who are just waiting to be saved, and all of these encounters are just fuel for your game master to be able to run their campaign. If you want another great example, although admittedly it's probably more of an example of a druid than anything else, is Storm from the 90s series of X-Men. What she used to do is she used to just yell out, like commanding the elements to come to a heat and call. So she would raise her hands and she would say, "Winds, rise to my aid and help me stifle the waves before they hit my friends." You know, that just sound, you know, like this resonating, holy words that just change the world around you. That, for me, is the essence of divine magic, and clerics are right at the top of it, what that is. Alright, the last thing I'm going to leave you guys with in terms of our cleric spotlight is death prayers. Now, many GMs may disagree with me on this, but I always play with the house rule that any divine character who dies in the heat of battle may, in their final moments, have a prayer to a deity. Clerics, for example, have a closer connection to their deity, and the more personal the kind of prayer has become, the more likely it is that you will be resurrected or saved from a grisly death. For example, if someone were to say, oh please, Lathander from up on high, don't let me die." That's pretty basic. You might get a 1% or a 5% if you're, like, you know, a young person. If you say, "Lathander, your blessing light has guided me through even the darkest times. However, the bulwark of evil rises in through the narrow abyss and will soon sweep over this land. Please, I beseech thee, give me strength for just one more fight." Now, something like that, for example, very heartfelt, very humble, very insightful, will get, say, maybe 25 to 30 points. So I'd then roll a percentage and then take it from that as to whether or not this person survives. Now, everyone gets this ability for my tables, but clerics and paladins and oracles, all the people who are divine favors, they get a little bit of a bonus. Not because of anything in particular, just because, well, the deities are watching over them. They're giving them power. I don't see why they wouldn't get a little extra as well. Alright guys, well thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. We are going to be going through a whole bunch of cool changes for the Deadaussiegamer, so do stay tuned for that. If you want to catch up on more stuff, then head on over to our Facebook page at facebook.com/Deadaussiegamer. And you can basically tune into our articles, share some memes and some chats. And speaking of chats, if you want to talk to me directly, head on over to our Discord page. The link will be in the description below. And I love to give advice to people, soundboard and share stories and ideas. We even do some one-shot games every once in a while when we've got nothing better to do. And of course, you can come and help us out and join us on our Patreon at patreon.com/DeadAussieGamer, where for as little as $1 a month, which is, let's face it, a ham and cheese toasty for me at the end of the month, you can really help us keep the lights on and keep making these great videos. I think we're currently opening up the idea of a second Patreon table for the Mythic tier Patreons. So if you've got $40 a month that you'd like to donate and get into a fun and awesome game, we are now having a game on Mondays at 8 a.m. GMT plus 8, which I believe is 8 p.m. US Eastern Standard Time. And then we are also going to be opening up a second table, which will be for our UK fans from, I think we're looking at something like 2 a.m. Australian Standard. And then on UK time, it's like, I'm going to say around 6-7 o'clock p.m. So we'll be running a second table for these guys as well. So if you are in the UK and you wanted to play a game with me, then no better time to head on over to our Patreon page. Until next time, guys, as always, from the Deadaussiegamer, game hard or die trying.